I looked around the ballroom and smiled. Every flower, every candle, every song reminded me of the future I thought Victoria and I would share. I walked toward her and whispered, "Everything is finally ready." She barely looked at me. "I hope nothing embarrasses me tonight." I forced a laugh. "Why would it? You worry too much." Guests filled the room. Her wealthy friends admired the decorations while I greeted everyone with genuine excitement. One man shook my hand. "You must be the lucky groom." "I definitely am," I answered. Victoria sighed loudly. "We'll see." Her words stung, but I ignored them. Emma quietly walked beside me. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." She studied my face. "You're smiling, but your eyes say something different." "I just want a night to be perfect." Emma squeezed my arm. "Perfection isn't as important as respect." Before I could answer, Victoria raised her glass and asked everyone for complete silence. I watched Victoria smile at the crowd before looking directly at me. My heart pounded with hope until she began speaking. "Everyone," she said, "Ethan is one of the kindest men I've ever met." Several guests clapped. She continued, "He's honest, loyal, and hardworking." I smiled nervously. Then her expression changed. "But kindness isn't enough to build the life I want." The room became silent. She laughed softly. "He's simply not husband material." Someone whispered, "Did she really say that?" Victoria shrugged. "Love doesn't pay for private jets or luxury homes. A husband should bring power, influence, and connections. Ethan can't give me those things." Every sentence struck harder than the last. I swallowed and asked quietly, "Victoria, is this some kind of joke?" She folded her arms. "No, I'm finally being honest." The guests avoided my eyes. I felt my face burning, yet I refused to let anyone watch me beg for dignity there. I looked around the room one last time before setting my glass on the table. No speech came from me. I simply nodded once and turned toward the exit. "Ethan," Victoria called. "Are you seriously leaving?" I stopped but did not turn around. "You already said everything that mattered." She scoffed. "Don't be dramatic." I answered, "I'm protecting the little dignity I have left." Emma hurried after me. "Wait, I'll come with you." Outside, the cool night air hit my face. Emma whispered, "She had no right to treat you like that." I kept believing love could change her. I said. Emma shook her head. "Real love never asks you to earn basic respect." Her words settled deep inside me, but the pain refused to fade. I stared at the engagement ring in my hand and wondered whether I had been loving a dream instead of the woman standing behind me. I walked into the darkness without looking back again. I drove home without turning on the radio. The silence inside my car was louder than any music could have been. Every traffic light gave me another chance to think about what had happened, and every memory felt like another cut. I kept hearing Victoria's voice repeating the same words. "You're not husband material." By the time I reached my apartment, my hands were shaking. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and tossed my keys onto the table. The engagement ring was still in my pocket. I slowly took it out and placed it beside the framed photo of Victoria and me from our first vacation. For several seconds, I simply stared at it. Emma walked in quietly with 2 cups of tea. "I figured you'd come home," she said softly. "I didn't know where else to go." She sat across from me. "Talk to me." I rubbed my face. I spent 3 years trying to become the man she wanted. I worked overtime. I skipped vacations. I saved every dollar for our future. None of it mattered. Emma looked at me with sad eyes. "Ethan, tell me honestly, when was the last time she thanked you for anything?" I opened my mouth, but no answer came. She continued. "When was the last time she asked how you were feeling instead of asking about your next promotion?" Again, I couldn't answer. Emma sighed. "You weren't building a relationship. You were taking an endless test that you were never supposed to pass." Her words hurt because they were true. I lowered my head. I kept thinking that if I worked harder, she'd finally be proud of me. Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "The right woman doesn't measure your value by your paycheck." For the first time that night, tears filled my eyes. "I loved her, Emma." "I know. I still do." She nodded gently. "And that's exactly why this hurts so much." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while every memory replayed inside my head. I remembered our first date, the promises we made, the apartment we planned to buy together, and the children we once talked about having. Now every dream felt like it belonged to someone else. Near midnight, my phone buzzed again. Victoria. I watched her name appear on the screen until it disappeared. A second later, another message arrived. Victoria, you're overreacting. Then another. Victoria, you'll understand someday. I laughed bitterly. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt empty. I locked my phone and placed it on a nightstand. Emma knocked gently on my bedroom door. You awake? Yeah. She stepped inside. I just wanted to say one thing. I looked at her. You lost someone who couldn't see your worth. She paused before continuing. But Victoria lost someone who would have spent his entire life protecting her. Her words stayed with me long after she left. As the sun slowly began to rise outside my window, I realized something had changed inside me. My heart was still broken. My future was uncertain. But for the first time in years, I stopped asking how I could become enough for someone else. Instead, I asked myself a different question. Why was I trying so hard to earn love from someone who never truly respected me? I didn't know it yet, but exactly 1 week later, my entire life would change with a single phone call from Victoria's father. That call would begin a journey none of us could have imagined. For 7 days, I buried myself in work and ignored every message from Victoria. The silence hurt, but it also gave me room to breathe. On Monday morning, my phone rang while I was reviewing inventory reports. Hello. A calm voice answered. Ethan, this is Richard Langford. I sat up straight. Mr. Langford? I'd like you to come to my office this afternoon. We need to talk. My heart skipped. Is this about Victoria? You'll have your answers soon. Before I could ask another question, he ended the call. I stared at my phone. Emma looked up from the kitchen. Who was it? Victoria's father. Her eyes widened. What does he want? I have no idea. She folded her arms. Whatever happens, don't let anyone make you feel small again. I won't. That afternoon, I stood outside Langford Technologies headquarters. The towering glass building suddenly felt more intimidating than ever. Taking a deep breath, I walked through the revolving doors, completely unaware that my life was about to change forever. The receptionist smiled politely. Good afternoon, Mr. Carter. Mr. Langford is expecting you. I frowned. He's expecting me? Yes, sir. Please take the private elevator. The word sir felt strange. I had never been treated that way inside this building. When the elevator doors opened, Richard was already waiting outside his office. He extended his hand. Thank you for coming, Ethan. I shook it. You said we needed to talk. We do. Come inside. The office overlooked the entire city. Richard motioned toward a chair. Relax. I don't think I can. He gave a faint smile. Fair enough. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. If this meeting is about Victoria, I don't want to fight with her. Richard slowly shook his head. This meeting has nothing to do with repairing your relationship. I looked at him, confused. Then why am I here? He leaned forward, his expression serious. Because I've been watching you for years, Ethan, and it's time you learned the real reason. I stared at Richard, certain I had misunderstood him. You've been watching me? He nodded. Long before you started dating Victoria. I blinked. I don't understand. You joined this company as a junior operations coordinator 6 years ago. Most executives never noticed you. I did. I leaned back, speechless. Richard continued. Every month I received reports about employee performance. Your name kept appearing, not because you were the smartest, but because you solved problems without asking for credit. I was only doing my job. Exactly, he replied. When a warehouse flooded 2 years ago, you stayed all night helping workers save equipment. You never asked for overtime. I shrugged. They needed help. And when an employee was caught stealing medicine for his sick daughter, you quietly paid his hospital bills instead of humiliating him. My eyes widened. You knew about that? Richard smiled gently. I know far more than you realize. I lowered my voice. Why are you telling me all this now? His smile disappeared. Because I have an offer that will change your life forever. I frowned, convinced I'd heard him wrong. An offer? Richard folded his hands on the desk. Yes. I forced a nervous smile. Mr. Langford, if this is about giving me a promotion, I appreciate it. But there are people far more qualified than I am. He chuckled softly. That answer is exactly why you're sitting here. I looked at him in confusion. He opened a folder and slid it across the desk. Read the first page. I lowered my eyes and froze. Appointment. Acting Chief Executive Officer. My heart nearly stopped. There has to be some mistake. There isn't. I pushed the folder back toward him. I manage operations. I don't run billion-dollar companies. Richard calmly replied, titles don't create leaders. Character does. I shook my head. Victoria will never accept this. He looked directly in my eyes. I'm not asking Victoria. His voice became firm. I'm asking you. The room fell silent. I stared at the papers again, unable to breathe. One signature could change my future forever, but accepting it might destroy everything Victoria believed about me. I kept staring at the contract while dozens of thoughts collided inside my head. I don't know if I'm the right person, I admitted. Richard leaned back and said, Ethan, every executive in this building knows how to make money. Very few know how to earn trust. I looked up. Why me? Because I would rather leave my company to an honest man than a brilliant liar. Before I could answer, the office door opened. Daniel Brooks walked in carrying a stack of files. He smiled when he saw me. So, Richard finally told you. I looked between them. You knew about this? Daniel nodded. For months. I stood in disbelief. This can't be real. Richard rose from his chair and walked toward the window. I built this company over 40 years, he said quietly. I won't let pride or family politics destroy it. He turned to face me. I've already made my decision. I took one slow breath, met his eyes, and finally realized this wasn't an offer. It was the beginning of an entirely new life. I barely slept after leaving Richard's office. The signed contract rested inside my briefcase, but it felt heavier than anything I had ever carried. Early the next morning, Daniel called. Ready for your first day, CEO? I let out a nervous laugh. Please don't call me that. You'd better get used to it. I'm still wondering if Richard made the wrong choice. Daniel replied, a man who questions his own ability is usually safer than one who believes he's perfect. His words stayed with me during the drive. When I stepped into the executive lobby, conversations suddenly stopped. People stared. Someone whispered, isn't that the warehouse manager? Another voice answered, no, he's the new acting CEO. I pretended not to hear them. Daniel greeted me outside the boardroom. Nervous? Terrified. He smiled. Good. Overconfidence ruins companies. As we entered, every executive stood except one. Michael Turner remained seated, crossed his arms, and smirked. So, he said loudly, Richard actually handed this company to a nobody. The room instantly fell into uncomfortable silence. I met Michael's eyes and refused to look away. If that's how you see me, I said calmly, I'll let my word change your opinion. He laughed. My opinion isn't the problem. The board won't follow a man who came from the warehouse floor. Daniel stepped forward. Watch your tone, Michael. I'm only telling the truth. Before the argument could grow, Richard entered the room. Good morning. Everyone immediately stood. Richard looked at Michael. I believe my new acting CEO was speaking. Michael forced a smile. Of course. Richard nodded toward me. Ethan, this meeting is yours. My heartbeat echoed inside my chest. I walked to the front of the room and opened the presentation. I know many of you doubt me. No one interrupted. I don't expect your trust today. Several executives exchanged uncertain glances. I'll earn it through every decision I make. Sarah Collins smiled slightly. Michael rolled his eyes. Just as I reached the next slide, the boardroom doors opened again. Victoria walked in wearing a tailored white suit. She froze the moment she saw me standing at the head of the table, and the color slowly drained from her face. Victoria stared at me as if she had walked into the wrong room. What is he doing here? She asked, looking at Richard instead of me. Richard answered calmly, he's leading this meeting. She laughed in disbelief. That's not funny. No one is joking, Daniel said. Victoria turned toward me. Ethan, tell them this is some kind of mistake. I held her gaze. There isn't a mistake. Her expression hardened. You actually accepted? I did. She folded her arms. You think sitting in that chair makes you qualified? I took a slow breath. No, my decisions will prove whether I deserve it. She shook her head. My father built this company. It belongs with people who understand success. Richard's voice became firm. And what exactly is success, Victoria? She answered without hesitation. Power, influence, wealth. Richard looked disappointed. I taught you how to build a business, but somewhere along the way, you forgot how to judge character. The room fell silent. Before Victoria could respond, my assistant rushed inside, breathing heavily. Mr. Carter, she said, we have an emergency. One of our biggest clients is threatening to cancel their contract today. I closed my presentation and looked at my assistant. What happened? She caught her breath. Mr. Carter, Harrison Medical says they received the wrong shipment for the third time this month. They're threatening to terminate our 5-year contract unless someone fixes it today. Michael smirked. Congratulations, CEO. Your first crisis. Victoria crossed her arms. Let's see how experience beats kindness. I ignored the comments and turned to Daniel. How much time do we have? Less than 2 hours. I nodded. Then let's stop talking and start solving. Michael scoffed. You can't fix a disaster by being polite. I looked at him. No, but I can fix it by listening. I picked up the phone and called Harrison Medical's director. This is Ethan Carter. I'm personally coming to your office. Please give me one chance to make this right. After a brief pause, the director replied, You have 1 hour. I ended the call and grabbed my jacket. As I reached the door, Richard smiled proudly. Go show them why I chose you. Without another word, I rushed out, knowing my future depended on the next 60 minutes. Daniel and I arrived at Harrison Medical with only minutes to spare. The purchasing director was already waiting in the conference room, his expression cold. You have 5 minutes, he said. I nodded. That's all I need. He pushed several documents across the table. 3 incorrect shipments. Delayed surgeries. Angry doctors. Why shouldn't we end this contract today? I looked through every report before answering. You should be angry. We failed you. Daniel glanced at me, but stayed silent. I continued, I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to fix every mistake, replace every delayed shipment within 24 hours, and personally review your future orders. The director studied my face. You take responsibility for someone else's errors? I lead this company now. That makes them my errors too. After a long silence, he finally smiled. No CEO has ever said that to me. He extended his hand. You've earned one last chance. As we walked back to headquarters, my phone rang. Daniel looked at the screen and sighed. It's Victoria, and she's demanding to see you immediately. I returned to headquarters expecting another argument, but the moment I stepped into my office, Victoria was already waiting beside my desk. She didn't greet me. She simply crossed her arms and stared. So, she said, you're enjoying your little promotion. I set my briefcase down. If you're here to insult me again, I'm busy. She laughed bitterly. Don't flatter yourself. My father is making a mistake, and I'm trying to fix it. I looked at her calmly. Richard made his own decision. My father built this company for our family, she snapped. Not for an employee who got lucky. Before I could answer, the office door opened. A tall man in an expensive navy suit walked inside, wearing a confident smile. Victoria, he said warmly, sorry I'm late. She immediately smiled back. Ethan, she said, I'd like you to meet Mason Reed. He extended his hand. I've heard a lot about you. I shook it. Hopefully only the truth. His smile widened. We'll see about that. Mason kept smiling, but something about his eyes felt cold. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, he said. I wish I could say the same, I replied. Victoria stepped between us. Mason understands how successful companies are supposed to be run. I raised an eyebrow. Really? And how many companies has he built? She frowned. He doesn't need to prove anything to you. Mason chuckled. Victoria, relax. Ethan's just curious. He turned back to me. I've helped negotiate deals worth millions. Results matter more than resumes. I answered calmly. Results matter. So does how you achieve them. He shrugged. In business, nobody remembers how you win. They only remember that you won. I shook my head. I disagree. Before either of us could continue, Sarah Collins knocked gently on the open door. Mr. Carter, the department heads are waiting for your approval on next quarter's budget. I nodded. I'll be there in a minute. As Sarah left, Mason leaned closer and lowered his voice. Enjoy that office while you can, Ethan. It won't stay yours for long. I watched Mason leave my office with Victoria beside him. The moment the door closed, I let out a slow breath. Daniel walked in carrying several folders. I met Mason in the hallway, he said. First impression, I smiled faintly. He talks like he's already running the company. Daniel nodded. That's because he thinks he will. We headed toward the executive conference room together. As soon as I entered, the department head stood. Good morning, everyone. Sarah handed me the quarterly budget. We've already reviewed the numbers. I flipped through the pages until one section caught my attention. Why has the supplier budget increased by nearly 30%? The room fell silent. One manager cleared his throat. Those contracts were recommended by Mr. Mason. I frowned. Recommended by what authority? No one answered. I closed the file. Until I personally review every contract, none of these payments will be approved. Several executives exchanged nervous looks. Just then, Victoria pushed open the conference room door. You just made the biggest mistake of your career, she said, glaring at me. I looked at Victoria without raising my voice. If protecting the company is a mistake, I'll gladly make it. She walked straight to the table and dropped another folder in front of me. These contracts were personally reviewed by Mason. You're delaying projects worth millions. I opened the folder and scanned the first few pages. The prices are far above market value. Victoria Said impaciently. Premium partners charge premium prices. I looked at Daniel. Did procurement compare other bids? He answered honestly. No. Mason insisted these suppliers were the best option. I closed the folder. Then we'll start the process again. Victoria slammed her hand on the table. You don't have that authority. Before I could answer, Richard stepped into the room. I gave him that authority. The room became completely silent. Richard looked at every executive before speaking again. From today forward, no contract over $500,000 leaves this company without Ethan's final approval. Mason's confident smile disappeared for the first time. Something told me this battle was only beginning. The meeting ended, but the tension followed everyone into the hallway. As executives quietly returned to their offices, Mason stopped beside me with an arrogant smile. You embarrassed Victoria in front of the entire leadership team. I met his eyes. I challenged bad decisions, not her. He laughed. You still don't understand how business works. Then explain it to me. He slipped both hands into his pockets. Power belongs to the people willing to take it. I answered calmly. Real power is earned through trust. His smile faded. We'll see which one matters more. He walked away without another word. Later that afternoon, Olivia Hayes knocked on my office door. Do you have a minute? Of course. She placed a confidential file on my desk. I wasn't sure whether to bring this directly to you. I opened it and immediately noticed several supplier agreements carrying Mason's signature. What am I looking at? Olivia lowered her voice. Contracts that don't make sense. As I turned the final page, one payment caught my attention. Something about it felt dangerously wrong. I stared at the document in front of me while Olivia waited silently. This payment was approved by Mason? I asked. She nodded. Yes. The supplier is a new company created only 3 months ago. I frowned. Then why did we sign a 5-year contract with them? That's what concerned me. I leaned back in my chair. Who owns this supplier? Olivia hesitated. That's the difficult part. The ownership records are hidden behind several companies. I looked at her. Can you find a real owner? I'm already trying. I closed the file. Thank you for bringing this to me. She looked surprised. Most executives would ignore this kind of problem because it involves someone powerful. I smiled slightly. I'm not trying to protect powerful people. I'm trying to protect the company. Olivia nodded. That's exactly why some employees are starting to believe in you. After she left, I called Daniel. We need to investigate every contract Mason touched. His voice became serious. Ethan, be careful. If you're right, you're not just dealing with a bad decision. What do you mean? Daniel paused. You may be dealing with something much bigger. I spent the rest of the day reviewing every document connected to Mason's projects. The deeper I looked, the more questions appeared. Daniel entered my office carrying another stack of papers. You were right to be concerned. I looked up. What did you find? He placed the files on my desk. Several payments were transferred through different companies before reaching the final supplier. I opened the records. Someone was hiding the money trail. Daniel nodded. Exactly. I felt anger rising inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Do we have proof? Not enough yet. I stood and looked out the window. Then we find it. Daniel studied me. You know this could damage Victoria too. I stayed silent. That was the hardest part. No matter what Mason had done, Victoria was still someone I once planned to spend my life with. Daniel noticed my expression. Ethan, don't let old feelings blind you. I nodded slowly. I won't, but I also won't let anger control me. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Sarah. Her voice sounded worried. Ethan, you need to come to the employee department immediately. Why? Because someone is trying to make the workers turn against you. I reached the employee department and found Sarah standing beside a group of worried workers. What happened? I asked. One employee stepped forward. Mr. Carter, people are saying you're cutting jobs to save money. I looked at Sarah. Who started this rumor? She lowered her voice. We don't know yet, but it spread quickly this morning. I faced the employees. I want everyone to hear this from me. I am not here to destroy jobs. A worker asked. Then why are people saying that? Because someone benefits when employees lose trust in their leaders. The room became quiet. Sarah looked impressed. You understand how to calm people. I shook my head. I'm just telling them the truth. After the employees left, Sarah closed the door. Ethan, you should know something. What? Mason has been meeting with department heads privately. My expression changed. Trying to gain support? She nodded. He believes he can replace you. I looked at the company logo on the wall. I expected resistance. Sarah replied. This is more than resistance. She paused. It's a power struggle. At that moment, I realized Mason wasn't just trying to prove himself. He was trying to take everything. I returned to my office with a clear decision. I could no longer treat Mason's actions as simple competition. Something much deeper was happening inside the company. Olivia was waiting near my desk. You found something? I nodded. Enough to know we need stronger evidence. She opened her laptop. I checked the supplier records again, and one name appeared several times. I leaned closer. Whose name? She looked at me seriously. Mason Reed. I felt my jaw tighten. Are you sure? The records are incomplete, but the connections are too obvious to ignore. I walked toward the window. Victoria trusted him. Olivia quietly replied. Sometimes people believe what they want to be true. Her words reminded me of my own mistakes. I turned back. Can you help me build a legal case? She nodded. Yes, but be careful. If Mason realizes you're investigating him, he'll move faster. I know. My phone suddenly rang. It was Richard. Ethan, come to my office immediately. His voice sounded different. What happened? A long silence followed. Then he said, I need to tell you something about Mason that I should have told you before. I walked into Richard's office and immediately noticed the serious expression on his face. Something happened? I asked. Richard motioned for me to sit. Ethan, I should have warned you about Mason before you accepted this position. I looked at him carefully. What do you know? Richard sighed. Mason approached Victoria months ago. He wanted influence inside this company. I frowned. Through her. Yes. I felt disappointed, but not surprised. Richard continued. I thought he was only ambitious. I didn't realize how far he was willing to go. I placed the documents on his desk. We found suspicious contracts. Richard looked through them quietly. I was afraid this would happen. You knew. I suspected. His words shocked me. Then why didn't you stop him? Richard looked toward the window. Because I needed to know who could handle the truth without letting emotions destroy their judgment. I understood. You were testing me. He nodded. And you passed. I closed the folder. Then it's time we stop watching. Richard looked at me. What will you do? I answered firmly. I'll expose the truth and protect this company, no matter who stands in my way. I spent the next 3 days collecting every piece of evidence connected to Mason's decisions. Olivia reviewed legal documents, Daniel analyzed financial records, and Sarah gathered statements from employees who had been pressured. Late one evening, Daniel entered my office. We have enough to present the case. I looked up. Are you sure? He placed the files on my desk. payments, hidden ownership records, and false supplier reports. Everything connects back to Mason. I slowly opened the folder. What about Victoria? Daniel became quiet. You can't protect her from the truth forever. I lower my eyes. I know. The hardest part was accepting that the person I once loved was standing on the opposite side of my life. The next morning, I called for an emergency board meeting. When everyone entered the room, Mason arrived confidently. He smiled. I hope this meeting is important. I looked at him. It is. He sat down. Then let's hear what you have to say. I placed the first document on the table. Mason, I want to discuss your contracts. Mason looked at the document and smiled. That's it? A few papers. I remained calm. These aren't just papers. They show payments made to companies connected to you. The room became silent. Victoria immediately stood. That's impossible. I looked at her. Victoria, please sit down. Let the evidence speak. Mason laughed. You actually believe this proves something? Olivia opened her folder. We verified every transaction. The ownership trail was hidden, but we found a connection. Mason's expression changed slightly. Daniel placed another file on the table. We also found employees who were pressured to approve these contracts. Michael leaned forward. Are you accusing Mason of fraud? I answered carefully. I am presenting facts. The board can decide. Mason looked around the room. This is a setup. I shook my head. No, this is accountability. Victoria stared at Mason. Tell them it's not true. For the first time, Mason looked uncomfortable. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Then the conference room doors suddenly opened. 2 investigators walked inside. The entire room froze as the investigators walked toward the table. One of them showed his identification. We are here regarding the financial investigation connected to Langford Technologies' supplier contracts. Mason's confident expression disappeared. This is a misunderstanding. The investigator looked at him. Mr. Reed, we need you to answer some questions. Victoria stepped forward. Wait, there has to be an explanation. I watched her face change as reality finally reached her. Mason looked at me with anger. You did this. I shook my head. No, Mason, your own choices did this. He lowered his voice. You think you're better than me? I looked at him. No, I just decided to stop ignoring the truth. The investigators continued collecting documents. Michael suddenly looked nervous. Why are you looking at me? Daniel replied calmly. Because your approval signatures are also on these contracts. Michael's face went pale. The room that once questioned my leadership was now filled with silence. As Mason and Michael were escorted away for questioning, Victoria remained standing beside the table. She looked at me differently, not with anger, with regret. I stared at Victoria's handwritten note for several minutes before picking it up. We need to talk. Please. A week ago, I would have rushed to see her. Now I simply folded the note and placed it inside my desk drawer. A soft knock broke the silence. Come in. Victoria stepped into my office slowly. She looked nothing like the confident woman who had laughed at me during our engagement party. Thank you for seeing me, she whispered. I remained standing. What did you want to say? She lowered her eyes. I came to apologize. The room became silent. I am listening. She took a deep breath. I judged you by your salary, your position, and your background. I convinced myself that kindness wasn't enough. I didn't interrupt. Tears gathered in her eyes. I was wrong, Ethan. I answered quietly. Being wrong and hurting someone are 2 different things. She nodded. I know. For the first time since we met, Victoria had no excuses. She only had regret, and I wasn't sure whether regret could repair everything she had destroyed. Victoria looked at me with trembling eyes. I don't expect you to forgive me today. I crossed my arms. Then why are you here? She took a slow breath. Because I owe you the truth. I remained silent. When Mason came into my life, he promised everything I thought I wanted. Luxury, influence, powerful connections. I believed that was the future I deserved. And what about us? I asked. Her voice cracked. I convinced myself that loving you wasn't enough. I looked away for a moment. You didn't just leave me, Victoria. You made sure everyone believed I wasn't worth choosing. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I know. She wiped her face. I replay that night every day. I answered quietly. So do I. The silence between us felt endless. Finally, she whispered, "If I could go back, I'd stop myself before saying those words." I met her eyes. "But you can't." She nodded. "No." A gentle knock interrupted us. Richard stepped into the office, looked at both of us, and spoke softly. "I think it's time both of you heard something I've kept secret for years." Richard closed the office door behind him and looked at both of us before taking a seat. "Victoria," he said quietly, "what I'm about to tell you may change how you see everything." She wiped her tears. "What is it?" He folded his hands. "The day Ethan joined this company, I noticed something different about him." I frowned. "You've already told me that." Richard nodded. "Not the whole story." He looked at Victoria. 3 years ago, before you and Ethan got engaged, I decided he was the kind of leader this company would need someday." Victoria stared at him. "You chose him that long ago?" "Yes." She shook her head in disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to discover his value yourself." Silence filled the room. Richard continued. "Instead, you judged him by his title, his bank account, and the car he drove." Victoria covered her face. "I failed him." Richard looked at me. "No, Victoria." He paused. "You failed yourself." His words echoed through the office. For the first time, Victoria realized she hadn't lost me because of one mistake. She had lost me because of the person she had chosen to become. Victoria slowly lowered her hands and looked at me through tear-filled eyes. "Ethan, I don't deserve another chance." I answered honestly. "No, you don't." She nodded without arguing. "I know." For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "Is there anything I could do to make things right?" I took a deep breath. "You can't erase that night." "I wish I could." "So do I." She looked around my office before her eyes settled on the engagement ring lying inside a small glass box on the shelf. "You kept it." "I kept it as a reminder." "A reminder of me?" I shook my head. "A reminder never to measure my worth through someone else's approval." She closed her eyes. "I finally understand." Richard quietly stood and walked toward the door. "I'll leave you two alone." After he left, Victoria reached into her purse and placed a folded letter on my desk. I wrote everything I couldn't say aloud. I looked at the envelope. What if I never read it? She gave me a sad smile. "Then I'll accept that." With trembling hands, she turned, walked out of my office, and softly closed the door behind her. Victoria slowly lowered her hands and looked at me through tear-filled eyes. "Ethan, I don't deserve another chance." I answered honestly. "No, you don't." She nodded without arguing. "I know." For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "Is there anything I could do to make things right?" I took a deep breath. "You can't erase that night." "I wish I could." "So do I." She looked around my office before her eyes settled on the engagement ring lying inside a small glass box on the shelf. "You kept it." I kept it as a reminder. "A reminder of me?" I shook my head. "A reminder never to measure my worth through someone else's approval." She closed her eyes. "I finally understand." Richard quietly stood and walked toward the door. "I'll leave you two alone." After he left, Victoria reached into her purse and placed a folded letter on my desk. I wrote everything I couldn't say aloud. I looked at the envelope. What if I never read it? She gave me a sad smile. "Then I'll accept that." With trembling hands, she turned, walked out of my office, and softly closed the door behind her. I stared at the letter for several minutes before finally opening it. Every line was written in Victoria's handwriting, but the confidence that once filled her words was gone. "Ethan, I spent years chasing status instead of happiness. I thought success was measured by expensive cars, powerful friends, and impressive titles. I never realized the greatest man in my life was standing beside me all along. I broke your heart because I couldn't see your value. I am truly sorry." I folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. A soft knock came from the doorway. Henry Lawson stepped inside with a warm smile. "You must be Ethan." "I am." He extended his hand. "I'm an old friend of Richard's." We shook hands. He looked around my office before saying quietly, "Richard didn't choose you after Victoria left you." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Henry smiled. He chose you years before that night because he believed character always outlives talent. For the first time, I realized my greatest victory wasn't becoming CEO. It was finally believing in myself. The morning of Richard's retirement arrived faster than I expected. Standing outside the auditorium, I adjusted my tie and took a deep breath. Daniel walked beside me with a smile. Nervous? I laughed quietly, more than I was on my first day. You've earned this moment. I hope I have. He placed a hand on my shoulder. You stopped thinking about proving yourself months ago. That's why you're ready. His words stayed with me as we entered the packed auditorium. Employees from every department filled the seats. For the first time since joining the company, they weren't looking at me with doubt. They were smiling. Richard stepped onto the stage, and the room erupted into applause. He raised his hand for silence. For 40 years, this company has been my home. The applause faded. I built these walls with thousands of dedicated people. He looked toward me. Today, I leave knowing its future is in better hands than my own. My heart pounded. Richard smiled warmly. Ethan, would you please join me on stage? Every eye in the room turned toward me as I slowly stood and walked forward. I walked onto the stage as hundreds of employees applauded. My hands felt unsteady, but I kept moving until I stood beside Richard. He smiled at me. Still nervous? I laughed softly. A little. Good, he replied. It means you understand the weight of responsibility. He turned toward the audience. When I started this company, I believed success came from hard work alone. I was wrong. The room became quiet. I learned that a business survives because of trust. He looked at me again. Ethan reminded me of that lesson. Richard reached into his briefcase and removed a leather folder. I officially transfer my authority as Chief Executive Officer to Ethan Carter. The auditorium erupted into applause once more. I accepted the folder with trembling hands. Thank you, I whispered. Richard leaned closer. Don't thank me. I looked at him. Earn it every day. I nodded. I will. Daniel smiled proudly from the front row, while Sarah wiped away a tear. Then I noticed Victoria standing near the back of the auditorium. She wasn't applauding for herself. She was quietly smiling, as if she had finally accepted that my future no longer belonged to our past. I stepped to the podium and looked across the auditorium. Hundreds of faces stared back at me. Months earlier, many of them had questioned whether I belonged here. Today, they were waiting to hear my first speech as CEO. I cleared my throat. I don't stand here because I'm the smartest person in this company. The room became silent. I stand here because someone believed character matters more than status. I glanced toward Richard. He gave me an opportunity that changed my life. Richard smiled proudly. I continued. From today forward, no employee will be judged by family name, expensive clothes, or job title. Several employees nodded. You'll be judged by your honesty, your effort, and the way you treat people. Applause spread through the auditorium. I raised my hand. I also have another announcement. The applause faded. We're launching a leadership program so every hardworking employee has the chance to grow. Sarah smiled warmly. Daniel whispered, That's exactly what this company needed. Looking around the room, I realized I wasn't simply leading a business anymore. I was helping build a future where everyone had a fair chance to succeed. The ceremony ended, but many employees stayed behind to congratulate me. As I shook hands and thanked them, I realized something had changed. They weren't congratulating a title. They were celebrating hope. Daniel walked over with a smile. CEO Carter. That still sounds strange. I laughed. It sounds strange to me too. It won't for long. Before I could answer, Victoria approached slowly. May I have a minute? Daniel quietly stepped away. I looked at her. Of course. She took a deep breath. I came to tell you I'm resigning. I wasn't expecting those words. Are you sure? She nodded. I need to build a life without relying on my father's name or anyone else's success. I respected her honesty. I hope you find what you're looking for. She smiled sadly. I think I've finally figured out what really matters. I extended my hand. I wish you the best. Instead of shaking it, she hugged me briefly. Thank you for forgiving me, even though you couldn't love me again. When she stepped back, there were tears in her eyes, but for the first time, they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of acceptance,